much. I'm going to move straight on then, just because I'm looking at the time here, and ask Matt Kingswood to come in from Digital College. Matt, are you okay with 10 minutes for your bit? Tell me if not.
Yeah, 10 minutes is fine. It'd help if I took the mute off, but there you go. So yeah, I'll crack on if that's all right.
Thank
Tony.
you, Matt. Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you, Ursa, for putting this forum together, and thank you for Joe and Joni. So start again. Thank you to Joe and Tony for chairing these ongoing forums. Yeah, that was a really interesting talk there by Darren, although all those pictures of burgers has made me rather hungry. So I'm definitely keeping to the 10 minutes because I might go get McDonald's myself. So very quickly, I'm Matt, I'm CEO of Digital College. I guess a lot of you probably heard of us already. We're an online training provider. And what we have been working on, I think, of especially during lockdown, is around accessibility. There's a big push for us to reach more people with things like learning and other interventions. But what that has done is really thrown into the spotlight a lot of questions about accessibility. So I'm just going to share my screen if I can. There's a couple of buttons here I need to press first. And then we can just talk a little bit more about this accessibility thing. Right. It's coming up in a second. Right, can we all see the slideshow? Is that there, Tony?
Got it.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So yeah, the topic around this is around accessibility. But just starting off, I think there's various ways of looking at the barriers, but kind of highlighted on this slide 4 kind of common groups of thinking about the barriers. But there's a plus at the bottom. So as I go through, it'd be great if people want to chip in, especially towards the end of the list, about other things I might have missed. But it was very interesting listening to Darren. I think he probably raised some other barriers that we might not have thought of traditionally. So the first one up, time. Obviously, not everybody's available 9 till 5. But what we've discovered during lockdown is there's a lot of people who want to start a course now. Term times don't fit for them. Waiting for a class of 10 to come together. Or the duration or the commitment. So we've actually found, rather than a barrier being 9 till 5, one of the most common barriers we're now finding is people want to start learning now and not be restricted to traditional term times. Digital poverty is getting a lot of airtime, and quite rightly so. On a recent talk we did with IEP, we surveyed the audience there, and over 50% of people said that the majority of people they were dealing with had some form of digital poverty. Now this takes several forms, around equipment, around the strength of broadband, and maybe skills as well. But digital poverty is obviously a key problem. I think the world's changing a little bit, especially in the UK now, with schemes coming together. I noticed on the chat, TCHC were offering things like laptops, but it's still going to be a big barrier. And then we also have specific learning difficulties. So that term is one that we use because we work with British Dyslexia Association. We're what's known as Dyslexia Smart as an organisation. They use the term specific learning difficulties to represent, as you'd expect, lots of different aspects of learning and barriers there, things like dyslexia. And then another obviously group is a group where have health conditions and disabilities. Some of which are visible, some of which, like mental health, may be not so visible, but these would all be barriers. But I put in the plus there, the plus ... and hopefully people can contribute on chat about what other barriers they might think of. But things like English may not be a first language. What about the domestic situation? Darren gave an interesting example about a young gentleman and not getting the most positive encouragement from his father. Are those going to be barriers to learning? You shouldn't be taking a course. You should be coming down with me down to the pub. Is it those kind of things going on? And then role models in life as well. If you're surrounded by role models who are very much into learning and academia, obviously you're going to go that way. If you don't have those role models, maybe that becomes a bit of a barrier as well. So when I first started putting this slide down, I thought, oh yeah, there's some fairly easy groups of barriers we can put together. But actually, when you really sit down and think about it, the barriers to learning, the barriers to accessibility, they are there's many of them. Obviously, they can be quite complex, quite subtle, and can be quite overlapping. And that's going to come in a little bit more into our presentation as we go on. But let's just look at some of the numbers here. The 3 numbers here represent normally what I kind of call the 1 in 6 rule. So roughly 1 in 6 people, that's 15%, have some form of specific learning difficulty. 17% don't use the internet, which you may find incredible this day and age. And then 13% is a different example, different group altogether, have some form of hearing loss. These are only small examples, but if you add them up, you know, a significant part of the population will have some form of barriers to accessibility. And if you start to go into different cohorts, different groups, for example, the DE economic group, over 50% of them will not use a computer to access the internet. So these barriers really do start to add up. So it's not something we can afford to sweep under the carpet. And I'm sure many of you listening today, this is your everyday, is dealing with people with barriers. So let's talk a little bit more about what we can do about it. So one thing we could do is evaluate what we do at present. We can evaluate the cohorts we have. We could evaluate the ways that we're offering programs of training, programs of support, and try and see how they fit together. So a very simple way of doing this, which I've thrown up on the screen here, is a scorecard approach. So I've put together the 4 groups we highlighted at the start. Maybe we would juggle those groups around and pick out different things if you felt it appropriate. And you could kind of score them or talk about their needs in low, medium, and high. But basically what you're doing is you're trying to objectively analyze what your cohorts may need. And I'd flagged 2 cohorts there with different needs. So cohort A, actually, they have a lot of time, so they're not high need in terms of time, but high need in digital poverty. And cohort B have kind of fairly low needs across the board. So maybe that's a cohort of, you know, reasonably skilled people who are recently out of work, for example. So we could map our cohort like that. One thing we're big on Digital College is, and we'll talk about a little bit later, is flexibility in presentation. So another way of looking at it is to maybe use some diagrams. And this is a diagram showing kind of the same information. So it's a radar diagram. And what we've done is we've stretched the shapes out so that you can see the orange section in the middle. That's the low need cohort. And then we have a blue section there, which kind of visually maps out what our higher need cohort may look like. And that's a different way of doing it. And you can kind of stretch that shape out using different dimensions. So you can see patterns of what the cohorts look like. So that's our cohort. Maybe we could actually objectively review and assess our learning programs or our programs of intervention along the same lines. So we could say, right, we've got this training program, maybe to get people into construction. How well does it score? How well does it cater for people in terms of time, health, digital poverty, and SPLDs, for example? And when you've done that, you could obviously map the learning program or the program of intervention. On top of there, it's a nice diagram. They help you visualize, hang on a minute, we've got some gaps here, or we bring on a new cohort that's going to be different. What are the likely gaps for the way we work at the moment, and fitting that in? So that's a really nice, easy way. And hey, looks great when you present this to your managers and directors. It's a nice, easy way of thinking about things. But if I was being honest, it makes me a little bit uncomfortable, and uncomfortable for one reason. We're dealing with whole groups. So, you know, we're clustering people together in groups of 10, 20, 50, 100, and we're kind of saying, right, we're going to try and design programs and what have you that works for the whole group. Well, I'm sure there's plenty of people jumping up and down saying, well, you know, we pride ourselves. We work with individuals. It's tailored programs. It's tailored support. So, you know, what can we do? Is there a way that we can change our approach, change the way we design solutions, not for the groups, but for individuals. So we're just going to talk a little bit more about that now. One way of doing that is, an example of that is there's something called the Universal Design for Learning. That is a framework, and there's many different frameworks out there. The reason I like the Universal Design for Learning at a high level is it actually captures a lot of our thoughts at Digital College about how we would like to approach learning to make it more accessible. And obviously our goal for accessible learning is, out of that population of 100 in our cohort, we want to try and get learning outcomes for all of them. And to do that, we would try and work things in 3 different ways. So there's multiple forms of engagement, which I'll talk about in a minute what that really means. But as you can imagine, how can we reach people different ways? You've got multiple models of representation. So that's you put forward, of course, the support and intervention. And then finally, multiple opportunities of expression. So that's maybe offering your individuals, the people taking your courses, how can they get involved? How can they express what they want to do? How can they feed back to you and take part in assessments and things? So what might a good learning experience be? So the key thing is we're trying to reach all the individuals here. And what we're saying is we're going to do it by offering multiple forms of engagement, multiple forms of representation, and multiple forms of expression. And the table here shows all the different ideas. So for engagement, we're going to reach them different ways. Drop-in sessions, one-to-one video. There'll be on-demand content, mobile, tablet, and laptop. And I will stress, mobile is becoming more and more important. A lot of the statistics coming out now, for example, the Ofcom annual survey is showing there's a growing number of people that interact with the internet using nothing else apart from a mobile phone or a smartphone. So that's one of the key areas of engagement we need to start to embrace. But with all these, we have to make it self-configurable. We have to let the learner almost build their own course from the resources we're offering. Similarly with representation, a lot of you probably come across the different types of learning theory. So some of us learn visually, some of us learn by doing. There's all these different ways of learning. So when we actually put forward a course, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but we may need to offer text, lots of pictures, do some narration with all the overlap, so somebody will engage with one form or the other more. And similarly, some people, they absorb the instructional content, some people need to be hands-on. And then finally, selective content. So can we allow our learners to pick their own path through the course? They don't want to be bored by what they've done already. They don't want to be distracted by types of learning they don't really respond to and engage with. Can they select the learning and the content that works best for them? And us as educators, we need to stop thinking, right, I need to see someone do 98% of that content before they move on. You know, that might not be appropriate for them. What we need to do is make sure that it's not about percentage of content. It becomes, are they able to meet the learning outcomes and the goals they want? Because they've picked their own way through the course, are they ready to move on? Which leads nicely into the multiple forms of expression. So activities, quizzes, games.
Matt, but can I just flag you? We've only got a couple of minutes left.
Oh, right. Sorry. Right. Well, I'm nearly done anyway. Don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
But then we've also got group interaction as well. And one thing to bear in mind about group interaction is we need to make some things optional. Not everybody's going to be comfortable with interacting as a group. So final thing, most important thing probably of all this is, when the last time did you put a program together, you actually changed it? And if there's one takeaway from this thing is, please take that question away with you. If it's difficult for you to change your courses, difficult to change your programs, then maybe you have to a little bit of a rethink about the way they're structured and built up. But really that feedback loop. We all sit in this world with our own biases. Our customers know what they want. So why don't we go out and ask them? And we do that probably quite a lot. But when is the last time we actually looked at what they said and we changed a course or changed a program accordingly? And if we do that, I can guarantee we'll reach many more of the 100 people we're trying to reach to make sure everybody's included. That's it. There you go. Tony, that was a good, well timed, I hope. Those are my contact details.
Thank you, Matt. That's wonderful. I'm so sorry to have to do that. I'm just conscious that people might have to jump off for other calls. So in doing that, I want to bring in Elizabeth, CEO of Ursa, because she's got an update for us before people disappear. Thank you, Matt.
Hiya. I've got really dodgy internet, so I'm just going to endeavour to share a slide. Can you just bear with me? That sort of bombing on somebody else. So I just want to thank everybody for today's presentation, and just to tell us that we've done 86 events online since the March. So I think this has been quite a marathon for the urban sector. And we have few events now to the end of 2020. So what point inside, but tomorrow we've got the Ursa Justice Rehabilitation Forum. Thursday we've got women, the COVID session shaping the future of employability programs. Friday we've got the Ursa special meeting, at which we're going to consider changes to the association. And I don't know whether people are aware of this, but those were formed in May 2005 and have been updated twice since, but need some modernisation. And we're also going to take a special resolution to apply for charity status. So that's going to be the institutional part of the business, but we're also going to do an overview of 2020 and outline the first 2021, which will include a bursary fund we have organisations with the employment arena who are already person. And we will end the special meeting with a guest speaker. We have Claire Ward, who's the CEO of the Institute of Working, and she's going to speak about what collaboration means and how it can work in practice. So I'm sure that will set the tone for contracts that are about to come and for our collaboration in 2020. And then finally, just to make you aware, we know that the Restart ITTs are about to be released. There's going to be a very busy procurement period, and Ursa is going to host some market sharing activities. Date times be confirmed, possibly at very short notice, because we're trying to get this in the right weeks, in the right part of the busy window. So that's it for me. Thank you to everybody today. We have some non-members with us. We hope you like the event. Join us again later in the week to find out a bit more about what Ursa's doing, and hopefully you'll join us at 10 member events in 2021. And thanks to Tony for sharing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Some great information there. Thank you to all our speakers and to those who attended the meeting. Sorry we've gone over a little bit. And yes, please join us on the next digitalisation forum. Goodbye for now.
Bye.